The Royals had a great series in Cleveland that was met with a sour end. What did we think about it all? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply, so download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. We are having a little bit later of an episode tonight. Got really caught up with work and some extra stuff after work, so didn't really have a chance to break down the game from earlier today in more of a timely manner. Tomorrow we will be bringing you a early afternoon type episode, so you won't have to wait around all day like you did today. We're not going to be recapping tomorrow's game with another late night episode, just because, again, schedule's pretty busy right now, but we'll still have a good episode tomorrow. We'll have a good episode tonight, and then we'll have a very, very early morning episode on Friday, a typical Mailbag Friday. I'm going to be heading out of town, so I want to make sure I get that recorded before I get in the car and make a 7-hour road trip where I'm not going to have any internet connection. But still, tonight, we are going to be able to break down what we saw in this Cleveland series, what we saw today, and what we can take away from it. Let's get out right in front of us here that there is nothing disappointing about the Cleveland series. I think you can be left wanting more, but I've always taken this approach in baseball that you just can't be greedy in baseball because it's such a long season. You play so many good teams, and just because you led for a long time in a certain game doesn't just guarantee you the win. And keep in mind, in Game 1 and Game 2 of that doubleheader on Monday, the Royals trailed, and I'm sure Cleveland believed we let those games slip away, right? There was that similar type of mentality when the Royals first visited Cleveland this year. The Royals had a 5-0 lead with Seth Lugo. They blew that game. The Royals felt like they should have won. The next day, the Royals trailed, came back late, and Cleveland felt like we should have won that game. So you trade off with it. But this was a little bit different because the Royals had dominated this series. I mean, they had come in a crucial spot and just pounded Cleveland to oblivion, at least for the first, let's call it 34, 33 innings of this series, until that fateful 7th inning today in which Michael Wacha had to go back out there in the 7th. I'll give my thoughts here in a second why he had to. And Lucas Erceg got doinked to death. I'm never going to be too upset about a guy's outing when he gave out a bunch of soft contact and a team took the lead off of him. What more can you do? They were good pitches. Yeah, you'd like a strikeout there, but there were a lot of soft contact there. And honestly, there was one ball that absolutely should have been caught when you've got one of the best defensive center fielders in the American League. Adam Frazier, not so much, but somebody's got to be aggressive and go and get that ball. I'm not sure if there wasn't the best read off the bat, but I would say 9 times out of 10, Kyle Isbell makes a catch on a ball that dropped today. So let's go to that 7th inning because we have recapped in most part what happened in Game 1 and Game 2 of this series. We didn't get a chance to recap last night because we had an early episode before the game. But last night with that rain delay, I mean, the bullpen was phenomenal. But also to that point, the bullpen was taxed going in today. And there was nothing that the Royals could have done. Michael Lorenzen had a hamstring strain in the second inning. So the Royals bullpen had to work 7 1/3, and they found a way to win. I think that alone sealed that series of it doesn't matter what happens in game 4. Yes, it would be awesome to take sole possession of first place, but win or lose tomorrow, and I'm speaking of that from the Wednesday perspective, win or lose in game 4, the season series isn't done, and the AL Central is not locked up, right? It makes it a little bit tougher now that you're trailing by a game, and Cleveland gets a really bad Pittsburgh team coming into Cleveland for their next series, and the Royals have to go play the Astros for 4 games. So yes, there is a downside to it, but Wednesday's performance made me think, okay, that's 3 straight wins in Cleveland. Actually, 4 if you go back to the previous series. They have clinched the tiebreaker, so it doesn't matter if the Royals lose the remaining games against Cleveland. They can't lose that tiebreaker, but we all know they can't lose the remaining games to Cleveland because that just puts them further back in the standings. But on the off chance Cleveland plays poorly against other opponents, they're going to have that tiebreaker regardless of what happens in Kansas City next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So let's go to today. Royals get out front early. Michael Massey has a leadoff home run. He's been great of late. We're actually going to talk about him tomorrow. Vinny Pasquantino, he homers in the first inning. Bobby Wood Jr. homers in the third inning, I think it was. They knock a couple in a little bit later on when Michael Wacha had to dance around some danger. Michael Garcia had a big pinch hit. So all in all, they have a 5-2 lead. You're going into the 7th inning, and Michael Wacha's at 91 pitches it was. Look, with the state of the bullpen, the Royals had to go one more inning with Michael Wacha. And hindsight 2020, it's easy to make calls on a bad decision. And I wouldn't even say today was a bad decision. It's easy for us as fans, as consumers of the sport, to criticize a move after something had already happened. It's not like he went to Chris Stratton in the 7th inning and Chris Stratton blew it. And even then, I could have seen the reasoning because they were out of bullpen arms. I mean, Andy Rogers tweeted out today after the game that there were a lot of guys that were unavailable. And keep in mind, the Royals have 4 straight games against Houston. They do not get an off day on Monday. In fact, they have an early game on Monday because of Labor Day against Cleveland. They don't get an off day till next Thursday. And as much as we would like to sit here and say every game matters at this point, that is true, right? The Royals didn't punt on today. But you got to be smart about how you handle this bullpen. I think we saw in this series what a rested bullpen looks like. And it was really damn good in game 1 of the doubleheader, game 2, and also a rain delay game on Wednesday. On Thursday, wasn't necessarily bad. No, Michael Wacha goes out for the 7th, gives up a leadoff home run to a 200 hitter in Bo Naylor. Then he gives up back-to-back singles. You can definitely make a case that after the tying run came to the plate, that Matt Quatrero goes to Lucas Ursig in that spot just to put him in less of a high leverage situation. But Michael Wacha has been one of the team's best starters all season long. You know, it's kind of like when Seth Lugo's been left out there before or Cole Reagans has been left out there. It's because you trust them over who you might go to in a spot like that. And in a perfect world, Michael Wacha dances around that danger, throws 105 pitches, and then Lucas Ursig has the final 2 innings. Right? Matt Quatrero even said today he didn't really want to use Chris Bubich, but he was warming up in the 9th inning the 8th inning, if the Royals were to tie it, and they didn't get it done. But I just do not have an issue in going to Michael Wacha because you can't run your bullpen into the ground when you still have a vitally important series against Houston coming up here starting tomorrow, and then Cleveland once again. You got to make sure this bullpen is rested. You can't throw every single guy, every good reliever, every night, every afternoon. I mean, the Royals had a doubleheader in a 4-game series. And might I mention that prior to Michael Wacha's outing today, the starters didn't go even into the 5th inning. Cole Reagans went 4. Alec Marsh went 4 2/3. Michael Lorenzen got 5 outs. They asked a lot of the bullpen in this series, and they were just taxed by the end of it. I don't fault Matt Quatrero for trying to squeeze one more inning out of Michael Wacha, because if you went into the game with the mentality of this bullpen's taxed, you try to squeeze an extra 8 to 9 to 10 efficient pitches from a guy like Michael Wacha. And then you can go to Lucas Ursig if things start to spiral. I did see some arguments for you got to have somebody warming up to begin the inning. I'm not going to fight you on that. I think that they could have been warming up Lucas Ursig to begin the inning, or Chris Bubich or somebody like that. But Michael Wacha made a bad pitch to Bo Naylor and then compounded that with just hittable pitches to Steven Kwan, who had been ice cold in that series. And then it was Chris Jimenez, right? No, not Chris Jimenez, Andres Jimenez, I believe it was, or I might be getting that wrong as well. One of the Jimenezes for Cleveland. I know that I'm getting my words and names mixed up here, but he got the single, so it's first and second. And then you go to Lucas Ursig, and you do get a flyout. You get a second pop-up, but either Kyle Isbell or Adam Frazier didn't get a good read, or the sun was a problem. I'm not really sure, but that ball can't drop. I believe the expected batting average was .040. I mean, that's got to get caught. Bobby Witt Jr.'s little bloop, or that he had to try to go up and catch off the bat of Will Brennan. Local kid, went to Blue Valley and K-State. It was hit under 70 miles an hour, I believe. I mean, just a bloop. And then Noel has a bloop to left field that MJ can't get to. I don't have an issue with how Lucas Ursig pitched today. Yeah, he allowed the inherited runners to score. Yeah, he had his first earned run as a Royal. He didn't get lit up. He didn't get tagged. Those were all bloops, and some of those were catchable. And it just happens in baseball sometimes. I know you don't want me to say that. You maybe want me to get a little bit more frustrated. I don't have an issue with Michael Wacha going out for the seventh inning. It didn't work out, and I don't have an issue with the way Lucas Ursig was used and how he threw in the game. Sometimes you get doinked to death, and it happened. But fortunately for the Royals, they already took 3 of 4, and they're just a game back from the Central, and they're going now to Houston to take on an Astros team that was very impressive in the finale against Philly in Philadelphia earlier today. The Guardians, they'll have an off day tomorrow. Then they're going to be welcoming the Pittsburgh Pirates to Cleveland before facing Kansas City again at Kauffman Stadium to begin next week. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, the Royals are 7 games through the gauntlet with 13 games to go. What do we think about what they've done, and what can we expect ahead of these next 13 games? That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to 2 of the sponsors today, starting with eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Also want to tell you about PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play that $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Again, it is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, the gauntlet is not quite over. They are going to be over halfway by the time they wrap up this series in Houston. And the good news is the Royals have gotten through the first 7 games with a winning record. They are 4-3. They were 9 outs away from getting a 4-game sweep, the first 4-game sweep in Cleveland since the early 70s. It's been over, what would that be, 50 plus years since the last time the Royals had accomplished a 4-game sweep in Cleveland. Lots of has changed, of course, and that was, in the first decade of Royals baseball even existing. But it slips away from them. You don't feel too good about it, but it's baseball. You move on, you flush it, and that's what this team has done all season long. Now you look at what is ahead for this team. They've got Houston, a Houston team that is completely different from the one they saw back at Kauffman Stadium in April when they were just floundering everywhere. They had nearly buried themselves, and they would have buried themselves if Seattle didn't choke it away. And Seattle probably had a worse choke than Cleveland did in terms of just teams catching them in the division. The Astros erased a 10-game deficit in like a few weeks, I think it was. Just crazy stuff. And even though the Royals have, oddly enough, had the Astros number over the last 2 years, this is another series where I think you would be fortunate just to split. I think that is the bare minimum of what the Royals need to accomplish. That way you get to 6-5 through 11 games, and you got 9 to go at that point. Again, all I had asked is you go 10-10 and the 20-game gauntlet, and you can almost guarantee playoff baseball for Kansas City. Now you might want to go 12-8 if you are to win this division, because you can't just hope and pray that Cleveland and Minnesota bottom out the rest of the way. You'll get your opportunities to go and take down Cleveland and Minnesota. In fact, that's all next week. It is going to be quite the week at the Truman Sports Complex. You're going to get Cleveland in Kansas City Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The Chiefs will open up their season Thursday night against Baltimore to kick off the NFL season. And then Minnesota returns to Kauffman Stadium for the final time in 2024 and the first time since opening day. And that'll be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And Saturday, that game will be on Fox. So it is going to be one hell of a weekend in Kansas City and one hell of a week in general, beginning on Monday. But first things first, you got to go into Minute Maid Park, and you got to take this momentum. And the way the offense has been swinging the bat, the way the bullpen has looked, take that into Houston and see if you can find a way to maybe do exactly what you did against Cleveland and take the first 3 games of the series, and then anything else is just playing with house money at that point. You have a 4-game sweep, all the better. You'd go undefeated against Houston in the regular season. But as I opened up this show with, you can't always be greedy in baseball. And I think there is nothing wrong with taking 2 of 4 against an Astros team that has caught fire in the second half. No, they are not the typical Astros team that has a loaded rotation and an elite bullpen and just hitters everywhere in that lineup. Don't get me wrong. They have a good rotation. Not as good as it's been in years past, but Hunter Brown tomorrow night has been much better and a lot better since the last times the Royals saw him in Kansas City. Framber Valdez has always been a steady hand in the rotation. They're going to see him on Friday. Kikuchi's going to be going for them on Saturday, and he hit 100 miles an hour last outing. So it looks a little bit different than when the Royals saw him as a Blue Jay back earlier in the season. And then on Sunday, I think it's Ronel Blanco, who had thrown a no-hitter earlier this year. And in fact, I think almost had back-to-back starts in which he almost threw a no-hitter, which is crazy stuff. So you're going to be facing good arms. You're going to see better arms in Houston than you saw in Cleveland. Josh Hader has seemingly turned things around. So if you get to the 9th inning, you definitely don't want to be trailing and facing the hard-throwing left-hander. You got to worry about Yordan Alvarez, who's coming off a 3-home-run game against Philly. Alex Bregman is still somebody you got to worry about. Jose Altuve. They just optioned Chas McCormick. We're going to get on to that in the next segment here, but that's what's next. That's what's coming up. The Royals have done their job in the gauntlet so far. Philly and Cleveland, 2 really good teams, 2 division leaders. You leave after 7 games, 4-3. I don't have an issue with it. Even though you got thumped by Philly on Saturday and Sunday and you blew the game today against Cleveland, if you would have told me last Friday going into the gauntlet, would you take 4-3? Absolutely. If you would tell me 6-5 through 11 games, absolutely. Even 5-6, I'm not going to lose sleep over. I'm really not. They would need to go in and probably sweep Cleveland if they go 5-6 after this weekend. And they do have Cleveland's number this year, going 7-3 in the first 10 games. But they'll have their opportunities to catch Cleveland and also maybe keep Minnesota at arm's length. They got swept by Atlanta, and that wrapped up, earlier tonight. But to me, this is all about 500 baseball, with your second, in my opinion, the second toughest stretch of the season. There are 13 of these left. If you can just survive it, you're not even going to need to sweat out those last 15 games. At that point, you start pinpointing, where can I watch this team clinch a playoff berth? When can I see them rush the field and dogpile on the mound? You hope it's in Kansas City. But remember back in 2014 when they did it in Chicago? They dogpiled on the mound and they celebrated. The year after that, they clinched the division against Seattle, celebrated then. But since that point, the Royals haven't done any clinching, nor had a winning record in any season since 2015, since they won the World Series. But if you play 500 ball, you are going to come out on the other end, I think at that point, just looking to when you can clinch a playoff berth. Hopefully, you play well enough where you can jump into first place of the division and you start talking about playoff seeding and getting a first-round bye and awaiting the winners of a Houston and Minnesota or a Cleveland and Baltimore. You can start worrying about that than going somewhere else and having to play on the road for a wild card series. But of just getting your foot in the door, just getting into the postseason, that's what happens if you get out of this gauntlet playing 500 baseball. We're going to take our final break of the show. Before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, let's preview this 4-game set in Houston against the Astros. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That could be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey. We're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Want to give a shout out to 2 more sponsors, beginning with Liquid IV. If you're like me and you like to drink a lot of water, but you want some flavor to it, be sure to get Liquid IVs and put them in your water bottle, put them in your Stanley, put them in whatever you may drink out of, because it makes your drink better and it also keeps you really hydrated. Today, it was really muggy, it was really humid, and I did a bad job during the day about staying hydrated. Then I had a beer league softball game. It was like playing in a sauna, but I made sure to put a couple of packets of Liquid IV into my water jug, and I felt totally fine after the game. So that's what they can do for you. They keep you hydrated. Even if you're not that big of a water drinker, I think the flavor's phenomenal, and they really, taste good to me, and they make me feel refreshed. They don't get any more headaches. I don't feel dehydrated because Liquid IV just takes care of all of that. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration Today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. And we are coming down to the final games of the season. I mean, there's still over 25 games left, but not many homestands to get back out to, not many home Royals games to get back out to. So if you're thinking about buying tickets, wanting to see the Royals against the Guardians coming up at the beginning of next week, I talked about how important that week is going to be for Kansas City and the Truman Sports Complex in general. Going to be a fantastic series against Minnesota coming up this weekend. Don't waste any more time. Head over to Game Time, evaluate what some of those prices are, because they have some great deals out there. They make it so simple. You never have to worry about where your ticket is coming from. And when I go to games, I always go to Game Time and buy my tickets that way. And I've already been looking for Tuesday, Wednesday, next weekend. Definitely going to be going next Saturday against the Twins. Should be a packed house for the majority of the week. And then pack the house against the Ravens when the Chiefs open up the NFL season. But buy your tickets over at Game Time, or if you're thinking about going to a concert or anything that requires buying a ticket, Game Time is going to have you covered. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Again, that is $20 off on your first purchase. Well, tomorrow the Royals are going to begin that 4-game series against the Astros. Brady Singer is going to be going in Game 1. Game 2 will be Seth Lugo. Hopefully he can bounce back from another lackluster start against a playoff team. Tough park to do it in, right? Minute Maid Park is a little bit of a bandbox. The Royals are going to be going to Yankee Stadium here in 2 weeks. It's another park that is not very favorable to pitchers and just gives the advantage to some power hitting lineups. And the Astros got some pop in that lineup. So do the New York Yankees. But it'll be Brady Singer going up against Hunter Brown, who now has 11 wins on the season. Big strikeout pitcher, 151 Ks in 140 and a third innings. And if you can recall, going all the way back to April 11th, Hunter Brown was the guy that gave up 9 runs in the first inning against the Royals. And remember, like the first 11 reached or something crazy like that? And it was absurd. And that was the series finale, against the Astros. But he had given up 9 earned, 11 hits, had given up a home run to Bobby Witt Jr., 40 pitches in that game. The Royals saw him really well. But after he wrapped up April with an 11.84 ERA, he had a 3.42 ERA in May. He had a 1.16 ERA in June, a 3.53 ERA in July, and a 1.85 ERA in August, which will conclude this weekend. So he has completely bounced back from that utter disaster at Kauffman Stadium. And you would have thought in a ballpark like that, that's favorable to the guy on the mound, but certainly not on that day. Right, he gave up 9 earned runs, and he gave up 14 earned runs in his first 2 starts of the year, and gave up 25 total earned runs in that first month. But in the remaining months of the year, he had 7 combined in May and June. You had 3, or what would it have been? Actually, he gave up 14 earned in July, but had multiple starts that looked really, really good against some divisional opponents in Texas and Seattle and Oakland. Point being, Hunter Brown really settled down after the Royals just knocked him around the ballpark all the way back in April. And April feels like years ago. And this is a much different Astros team and a much different rotation. Again, he had a 16-point-something ERA after that Royals game. He's now 11-7 with a 3.72 ERA, over 150 strikeouts. He is going to be much better than what he looked like back in April at Kauffman Stadium. On Friday, it'll be Seth Lugo going up against Framber Valdez. Framber has 13 wins on the year. So these two guys combine for 27 total wins. If you believe in pitcher wins, I really don't, but it is cool to see 2 of the guys in the American League that are front runners in wins for starting pitchers. Pretty cool to see. Framber Valdez has been really damn good over his last 15 starts. ERA is under 3, and he's 10-3 in those last 15 outings. His whip is just above 1, so he's still below league average. And even his last 7 starts, his whip is well below 1. So the Royals, going to see the best version of Framber Valdez, or at least a version of Framber Valdez that is really thriving. He had gone through, I believe, at least 1 month this year where he looked a little rough. I remember it was back in May, and 5.34 ERA going back to May, but that really was the only time that he struggled. He's got a 2.00 ERA in 4 starts in August. He had a 2.9 ERA in 5 starts in July, and he had a 3.11 ERA in 6 starts going back to June. So May was the only time that Framber Valdez didn't look very good, and it's shown in his overall numbers. This is typical Framber Valdez, and the Royals are going to have to be prepared for the very accurate left hand. That's the best way to call it. He's not really a strikeout pitcher, pitches to contact. He's very accurate. He's got great control, and that's something that I've always known about Framber Valdez, and I would say most of baseball fans know about the control that Framber Valdez has, and also pitching in big playoff games for the Houston Astros. On Saturday, it will be Cole Reagans going up against Yusei Kikuchi. The Royals did see Kikuchi back in, I want to say that was April as well, against the Blue Jays, and Kikuchi had their number. He was very, very good in that outing at Kauffman Stadium. And at Kauffman Stadium, he had really bad numbers going into that start, but he was good. He was good enough in that game, and the Blue Jays won it. I was there covering it, and I believe we had asked a couple of questions to the guys down in the clubhouse about what was different, and he just had a good night. Now, the Astros didn't make too many moves at the deadline, at least ones that you thought they might have made. You thought they would be in the running for maybe a bigger name starter than Yusei Kikuchi. But he, again, is one of those guys in the rotation that has big time strikeout stuff, though he has not been the best since coming over to Houston. If I had to say one guy that you feel like the Royals might be able to jump on because of the way they looked, it's Yusei Kikuchi. He has an 8.38 ERA in his last 7 games, a 6.20 ERA in his last 10 starts. So even though the stuff can be electric, he can run it up the triple digits from the left side. He's not been very good since coming over to the Houston Astros, and the Royals will be throwing Cole Reagans on that night. We know how good he's been, and as long as he doesn't cramp up again, you're probably going to see a much better version than you saw in game 1 of the doubleheader on Monday against the Guardians. Then on Sunday, the Royals have yet to announce a starter. That's probably going to be Alec Marsh because that would have been when he's due, right? It was a weird thing on Monday with the doubleheader, but Alec Marsh threw after Cole Reagans with Michael Lorenzen being on the injured list. This is going to be Alec Marsh, in my opinion. It'll be a 1:10 first pitch. Ronel Blanco will go for the Astros, seeking win number 10. He has been such an incredible story this year, and a lot of things below league average. His whip, 1.08 on the year. He has not been as efficient as he was early on in the year. ERA nearing 5 in his last 7 starts, but you go back over the last 15 starts, just nearly double that, and he's around where his season totals are 3.63 ERA. He's thrown 84 and a third innings in his last 15 outings and walked only 32 in that stretch. But is getting knocked around a little bit and was knocked around by the Boston Red Sox back on August 20th. That was at Minute Maid Park, gave up 5 earned runs in 3 2/3, and then got knocked around a little bit against the Phillies, only 2 earned runs in 5 2/3, but did give up 7 hits and walked 2. But prior to those 2 starts, he was really good in Tampa Bay, 6 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts, no walks. So we'll see what version the Royals get of Ronel Blanco on Sunday. Again, I imagine that Alec Marsh is going to be the starter in that game. So that's your Astros preview. That series begins tomorrow. Will be a lot of local football here. KU and Missouri play tomorrow. So I'll be, having 2 TVs set up in my garage so I can watch the games between the Royals and the Astros and KU and Missouri as well. Well, that's going to do it for us. Another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Soli, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about Michael Massey at the top of the order and maybe some guys that we can start to trust again in the bullpen. I know I don't always stick to my word of what we're going to talk about, but we'll be having a pretty quick turnaround for the next episode. Until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.